The memorized transaction list shows all existing memorized transactions you have created and can be accessed by going to the List drop-down menu and select Memorized Transaction List. A memorized transaction represents a transaction you have created that will be repeated for a number of periods at a pre-designated interval. You do not originate a memorized transactions from here. Any type of transaction you create can be memorized, whether it's an invoice, bill, credit memo, check, journal entry, or whatever. This is how it works. Let's say you are a landlord and are paid $1,000 monthly from all of your tenants, and you have a 12-month lease with everyone that starts on January 1st. You could create a new invoice each month for each tenant, but that would be a lot of work. Instead, you may want to utilize the Memorize Transaction function in QuickBooks by creating an invoice for each tenant once and then memorizing it. Let's say Christy Abercrombie is our tenant, and once we select her, we will select an item we have created called rent. The amount or rate is $1,000 as we indicated earlier, and we are going to date this invoice January 1st. You can memorize this transaction by clicking on the Memorize button on the above taskbar, or you can simply right-click your mouse somewhere in the body of the form and select Memorize Invoice, or you can click on Edit from the top drop-down menu and select Memorize Invoice as well. In any case, what will come up is the Memorize Transaction window. In the Name field, you can call this Memorize Transaction whatever you want to. Then select whether you want to be simply reminded of the memorized transaction via the reminder list, or you decide not to be reminded, or lastly, you can select Automate Transaction Entry, which, if selected, will automatically remind you via pop-up window whether you want to record your memorized transaction when it becomes due by simply clicking on a button provided when you are reminded. We recommend you select this option since it gives you the easiest way to be reminded and record the transaction at the same time. The next choice to make is to select how often or what interval of time you want this transaction to occur. You have to select from the predefined choices given to you in the drop-down menu provided. Then, once the how often is selected, then you pick the next date, which represents the first memorized transaction date after the date of the original transaction that is being memorized. So in our case, since the invoice we created is January 1st, then the next date should be February 1st. Then you select the number remaining from the original transaction, which in our case is 11 more. Also, if you desired, you can select how many days in advance to enter, which means you will be reminded that much sooner. Once you have completed this window to your satisfaction, click OK, and you will now need to save the original transaction. Once this is done, the memorized transaction will be part of the memorized transaction list, and you can edit, delete, record, open up, etc. any and all transactions shown in this list. Also, like any other list, you can modify the columns to show the fields available you want to see in the order you want to see them. If you ever want to change the amount or the information related to a memorized transaction, the way you do this is go in the memorized transaction list and double-click on the memorized transaction you want to modify, and then once the transaction is open, you can change whatever information you want for the particular transaction you opened up. And to have the changes take effect on future memorized transactions, you would need to rememorize it by selecting the Memorize function and then choosing the Replace option. Otherwise, if you just chose Add, then it would create a new series of memorized transactions. Again, once you've selected the Memorize choice, you would then need to save the transaction that you made changes to.